I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're grateful to today's briefers for the information. Colleagues, we had no doubt that today our Western colleagues would once again voice all kinds of ideas about what is taking place in Ukraine in light of the special military operation they were conducting. We are very familiar with the algorithm of your MO, and that is to distort and discredit the special military operation, to remain silent about inconvenient facts, and promote the fakes and propaganda efforts of Ukraine and those professional PR experts working for the regime. All your efforts are fully in line with the logic of the information war unleashed against Russia. That war is as intense as the military operations on the ground. Now, a new threshold of disinformation has been set by our Albanian colleague. The permanent representative of Albania has listed almost the entire list of crimes that are ascribed to us, without even taking the time to mention that no convincing evidence has been presented for any of these crimes. Now, it's understandable that you have trampled on the presumption of innocence a long time ago. Now, recently, joint Ukrainian and Western industry for the creation of fakes has reached a new level and has started creating fabrications and staging events in the best traditions of the infamous British-Syrian white helmets. Everyone is still hearing about the unprecedented, both in its cruelty as well as in its crudeness and the way it was performed, the provocation in the city of Bucha in the Kiev Oblast. It is still being promoted as a supposed crime committed by the Russian army, in spite of irrefutable evidence about the staged character of what took place, and this evidence is only increasing. I won't get into the details. We have informed the Security Council about most of them last Tuesday. After the British presidency, in contravention of the basic rules of procedure of the Council, did everything so as not to allow the organization of a separate meeting on this provocation. I will simply say that after a thorough analysis of the actions of the Ukrainian Nazis, it's hard to shake a sense of déjà vu. In 1944, the intellectual forefathers of the Kiev radicals, acting in the best traditions of the main Hitler propaganda czar Goebbels, organized a provocation with the supposedly brutally murdered civilians by Red Army soldiers in the town of Nemmersdorf in eastern Prussia. That was preceded by a circular letter sent to the biggest German newspapers, which described in detail how best to present the so-called atrocities of the Soviet soldiers. Today, people read newspapers less and less, and such guidelines are appearing on social media, and there's no particular attempt to even conceal them. Creators are recruited for crowd scenes and given instructions on what aspects to focus on. In other words, Goebbels would have been very happy with the ambition of his Ukrainian descendants. However, they were betrayed by the quality of their performance. The staged events in Nemmersdorf, aimed at creating the legend about the so-called mass murders and rapes by the Red Army, were subsequently and convincingly debunked by various experts, and the name of the town became synonymous with the crude propaganda stunt, just as the one that was organized in Bucha. However, the Bucha provocation last week was overshadowed by another one, which Ukrainian Nazis organized in the town of Kramatorsk, which for the time being is still under their control. This is a classic false flag operation. I'll dwell on it in a little more detail, especially since many mentioned it today. On the 8th of April, from the area around the town of Dobropolye, in 45 kilometers to the southwest of Kramatorsk, the Ukrainian armed forces conducted a strike using the rocket Tochka U on the main railroad station of the town of Kramatorsk. Over 50 people were killed, including 5 children. 98 people were wounded were delivered to the hospitals of Kramatorsk, including 16 children, 46 women, and 36 men. Why are we speaking? Why are we so sure about the responsibility of Ukrainians rather than Russian army, as was immediately stated by Western media? For several reasons. I'll mention 3 of them. First of all, the Russian army doesn't have the tactical missile systems Tochka U. They're obsolete. They have been replaced by Iskander rockets a long time ago and are only actively used by the Ukrainian army. Secondly, the pictures taken by witnesses shortly after the strike and before the arrival of Ukrainian propagandists made it possible to unequivocally determine not only the type of rocket, but the direction from which it was launched. And that area is under the control for the time being of the Ukrainian army. Thirdly, using the same pictures, it's easy to identify the serial number of the Tochka U rocket. It is part of the series Sh-915. Rockets from this serial group were regularly used to shell the cities of the Donbass. There are fragments from those rockets with the same serial numbers. The same type of rocket was used on the 14th of March by the 19th Separate Rocket Brigade by the Ukrainian army to conduct a rocket strike against the center of Donetsk. 21 inhabitants of Donetsk were killed, 36 were wounded. The horrific pictures of that strike are still continue to be passed off by Western media as the shelling of Kiev. So, the provocation in Kramatorsk was not very successful either. However, Ukrainian propagandists clearly are trying to learn from their mistakes and to work better. They're really trying hard. Just over the past few days, we have transmitted to the UN information on the following provocations that are being prepared. A staged discovery of mass graves in the town of Rakovka near Kiev. Now, Western journalists have arrived in the town of Kremenaya. Their goal is to report on the prepared provocation by the Ukrainian army of a supposed shelling by the Russian army of ambulances transporting patients. In the town of Belogorovka, a chlorine reserve has been mined on the territory of a water canal. The plan is to blow it up when units of the national militia of the Luhansk People's Army approach. In the town of Irpin, in the Kiev region, a provocation using the same script as in Bucha and Nemersdorf is being prepared. Members of the Ukrainian security forces intend to transport bodies from the morgue of a local hospital and put them in the basement in the suburb of the town. The bodies, then the Ukrainian forces will organize a staged event of the shooting and elimination of supposed special operation group from Russia that came from Irpin to kill witnesses of Russian war crimes. At the same time as undisputed, quote-unquote, undisputed evidence, bodies of Russian soldiers taken prisoner and killed by Ukrainian nationalists under torture will be placed there. We expect the circulation of videos from the stage event by Western media. Just today, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that in the Sumy region, the town, in one of the towns which was earlier under the control of the Russian forces, Western media have been invited to organize a staged event. In the town of Nizhnya Saravatka, next to Suma, in one of the basements, bodies are being carried to be placed in one of the basements. The staging of the so-called atrocities of the Russian army are being conducted by British film directors. The Russian forces, I just want to remind you, left that town 3 weeks ago. All these reports are coming from the inhabitants of these towns, from residents, and who obviously are not indifferent to the aims of our military operation. I also can't forget about reports from residents of Odessa that there are many members of the Ukrainian army that have been noticed there wearing Russian military uniforms. It seems that a large-scale and bloody provocation is being prepared in that city, or rather a false flag operation. So, colleagues, please don't tell us later that we didn't warn you about this. The already organized and planned provocations, along with the widespread practice of using civilians as a human shield, are shocking by their inhumane attitude to the fate of the people of Ukraine, and are a testimony of the complete disregard by Ukrainian Nazis of the norms of morality and international humanitarian law. Russia, as we have stated more than once, does not wage war against the civilian population. Mr. President, since today's meeting is also on the topic of women, peace, and security, I feel duty-bound to comment on this topic as well. As it applies to the Ukraine, of course, it has also been determined by ideology and full of provocations. We see a clear intention to present Russian soldiers as sadists and rapists. Just as in the past, the Soviet soldiers, victors of the World War II, were presented as sadists and rapists. We see that neither the goals or the Russophobia of the propaganda methods inherited by Ukraine has changed. However, reality is quite different. In spite of attempts to distort, even Western audiences sometimes get information about the brutal torturing of peaceful civilians by sadists from Ukrainian nationalist battalions. And women have also become victims of such atrocities. For example, in the building of primary school number 18 of Mariupol, which was held for a long time by the Nazi battalion Azov. Even seasoned soldiers were shocked by what they saw when they got there. On the floor in the corner of a basement, there was the body of a woman. Her hands had been hacked off, her face maimed, and a swastika was burned into her stomach. It's noteworthy that these horrific and published photographic evidence in Ukraine and the West are still being passed off as Russian war crimes. Mr. President, Ukrainian society has consistently been under the influence of nationalists as a minimum for the past 8 years. This is why, unfortunately, Ukrainian women, are presented in a very strange and I would say even savage light. This is best illustrated by the patriotic video, which has actively been disseminated on social media in the past few days. It shows a Western Ukrainian actress, while uttering chants and curses against Russia, as she's using a sickle to cut the throat of a tortured Russian soldier. Now, the only association that this video brings to mind is the terrorists of ISIL, which also circulated videos on which they cut the throats of their victims. It's sad that Ukraine has reached the depths of such unbridled cruelty, the depths of such blind radicalism that is in line with ISIL and extremism as well. So seeing this, we're only further convinced of the necessity of the special military operation conducted by Russia and that we had no other choice. The operation is necessary for the future of Ukraine and for the security not only of Russia, but of all the neighbors of Ukraine. For example, I very much doubt that peaceful Poles can feel safe in a situation where the perpetrators of the Volhynia massacre, which took the lives of tens of thousands of Poles in 1943, are hailed today as national heroes. I'm speaking specifically of peaceful Poles rather than the Polish authorities who have been blinded by Russophobia. Their policies have lost any degree of common sense a long time ago. Mr. President, in conclusion, I'd like to say something more optimistic. There is another Ukraine, which is being given another chance for peace and good neighborly relations thanks to our special military operation. And that Ukraine is already gaining its own symbols, including women. For example, few were left indifferent by the widely circulated video circulated on social media, which was filmed in one of the villages where the Ukrainian army entered. Now, a very elderly woman, a babushka, came to greet them, and she mistakes them for Russian soldiers. And so she brings out the red Soviet flag of victory. She greets them and tells them happily how long she's waited for liberation by them. Soldiers, and we have to pay them their due, do not harm the old lady. Quite to the contrary, they gave her a bag full of food. However, in exchange, they take the flag and start stomping on it. And then the old lady, realizing her mistake, demonstratively returns the bag with food to the soldiers and demands that they return the flag under which her parents fought. The video ends there. We very much want to believe that nothing happened to the old lady, because her brave act and courage have inspired many people already. We also want to believe that very soon she will live to see her liberation and will be able to bring out that red flag without fear on the day of victory, sacred to all of us, to honor the memory of her parents and those who liberated Ukraine from the Nazis, without fearing that someone will stomp on that flag. Thank you for your attention.
I note the contribution from the Russian representative.